How are you, Max?
Just fine. How are you doing?
I'm great. You're proudly holding the flag of atheism in your name, yeah? Essentially, right?
Yes,
You're like, I'm the atheist.
the one and only.
Do you believe atheism is something to be proud of?
I believe atheism is an inevitable conclusion to come to.
Oh, but that's not really answering my question, right? Do you believe it's something to be proud of? It could be a bad necessary conclusion, but is it something in your worldview, basically? But is it something that is like to be proud of? Do you think that atheism is something to be proud of in general? I'm just curious.
No, absolutely not necessarily. I don't think atheism is something to be proud of any more than our understanding of the Earth going around the sun is something to be proud of. It's something very interesting and very insightful. But if anything, I would say it's more humbling than makes me proud.
Okay, that's interesting. So you believe atheism is interesting and insightful, which I would disagree with, but I'll let you kind of ask your question before we get into that. Okay. So do you have any specific questions for me? So I'm assuming you do. So yeah.
Sure. Why should I believe any of it? What evidence is there that you would like to present that Islam is the one true religion, that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet? How would you prove any of that?
I don't prove anything to anyone. The Quran is the difference between Islam and any other faith. And I think this is very important for people to understand. In Islam, the job of us, or the job of the messengers of God, or us trying to fulfill the same message of the messengers of God, is not to convince anyone. This is not the attitude that any Muslim takes towards Islam. The attitude that we take towards Islam is quite simple. It is delivering the message. Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا عَلَى الرَّسُولِ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينُ. It's only upon the messenger to give a clear demonstration and delivery of the message. So it's upon me as someone who is acting as a messenger in this case, not a messenger of God like the prophets or something. No, I'm just delivering the message of the messenger of God. So I'm just conveying what he said, because he said, convey upon me my message to the people. So we are conveying the message of the messenger of God, the messenger of Allah. We say it to the people. We say that Allah have sent prophets and messengers. These prophets and messengers came in different times, different localities. They had one message, which is that there is only one entity worthy of worship. The entity is not like us as humans. Does not have children, does not have fathers, does not have grandfathers. Created the universe. It gives life and takes away life from people, causes death. And it created everything around us, and it's placed us in this life as a test. That whatever we do here in this life is a test for us. And if we choose to do good, because morality sources from that creator, from that God, and he reveals us to us. If we choose to do the good that he commanded us to do, then it will be good for us in this life, and it will be good for us in the afterlife. And if we choose to disobey and we choose to harm people and will do evil, there will be consequences in the afterlife for these actions. So this is essentially the message of Islam. And these prophets and messengers bring revelation. And within that revelation, there is the guidance and teachings and telling you what will happen in the future and what will happen to you when you die, etc. And this is the message of Islam. And we deliver that message to the people. And this is our job as Muslims. But trying to convince people, I believe, is already an incorrect attitude to take to anything. People have to have genuine interest in whatever it is that they're approaching. They have to have genuine interest, have to be sincere, and they have to look and research. And then I believe anyone who's sincere, who's open-minded, when he opens the Quran and he reads, he will recognize that what he's reading there is not human words. That this is not a human being writing this information, because this is a very distinguished difference, especially for people who read, between how humans write and what they say, and how the Creator addresses and speaks to his creation.
So I think you've given me a very succinct exegesis of what you believe, but I'm still trying to grasp at why you believe it.
No, you didn't ask me why do you believe it. He said, how can you convince me? These are two different questions. If you're asking me now personally, yeah, these are two different questions, right? So you started by saying, what would you give me to convince me, right? That Islam is the way, or La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, which is there's no God no God is worthy of being worshipped except Allah. That's what you asked. Now your question is different now. Now your question is, you're asking me, why do I believe in Islam? I believe you're just if you were just in the backstage, I've demonstrated multiple reasons for why I personally believe, and many Muslims believe, that even though this is not about me, but why Muslims generally believe the Quran is from God. For example, the information that is mentioned in the Quran, the life of the Prophet ﷺ himself, investigating his life, reading his life, looking at what he did, you will know that this is not someone who lies. It's not someone who's looking for worldly desires. This is not someone who would do it for any other reason other than he was a messenger of God. and the prophecies of the future, the information that he said about the future that no one could have known, information about the past that the Quran records that was not known at the time, nor recorded before. All of these different things are evidences for why Islam is the truth.
So you mentioned the Quran. I'm curious, those books behind you, that big volume with
Yes.
gold and air.
Yeah.
What are those books? I'm just curious.
Well, this is something written by someone called Sheikh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, who was like nearly like 800 years after the Prophet ﷺ. And he is one of the biggest scholars in Islamic history, essentially. This is a voluminous work called Majmu' al-Fatawa, which is essentially a work of jurisprudence giving verdicts on certain matters. Like, okay, why is the verdict on X, Y, and Z, or not doing X, Y, and Z? This whole voluminous work is just about that. And in every other kind of matter you can think about. These volumes have different subjects. Like some will say about the prayer, some will say about this, about that. So these verdicts that are recorded are about different topics. So it's a very voluminous work, for example. If you're referring to this one, yeah.
Yes, I would imagine that many of the footnotes in that document, would cite itself, lend authority, and treat the Quran as its legal authority. Is that the case? In other words, that collection of books largely refers back to the Quran as the law, as the thing to account by. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. The scholars are not authority within themselves. So whatever they say, they have to use evidences from the Quran or the teachings of the Prophet to kind of make it binding for believers to follow, essentially. If there's no evidence from the Quran, then it's not, or the Prophet's teaching, it's not binding for us to follow.
So when the Quran was delivered, if it was delivered as a divine document that addresses everything, why was it not delivered as all of those books behind you? Instead, it was just delivered in this one little volume.
You asking me why was the Quran not delivered as tens of thousands of voluminous works that expound on the Quran? Is that your question?
Well, my question is, it seems to me, here's where I'm coming from with the question. It seems to me that if the Quran is a divine document which addresses all areas of life, why is there a need for dozens of documents that sit behind you to interpret what the complete testament or witness of God said in the first place? Why was there confusion enough on the document, on the original Quran, to necessitate all of that commentary sitting behind you?
Well, that same Quran that you're reading, that you're saying is guidance in this case, is
I'm not saying that. You're saying that. You're the one saying the Quran is guidance in this case, not me.
Now there's a little bit of increase in volume, and I hope we still remain in the same cordial discussion that we're having. There's no need for you to... I said,
mischaracterize my position,
because I do have this kind of repeated always action that happens when I speak to atheists. They get very agitated for some reason when I'm speaking, and they get very upset, and I end up removing them. And I hope that does not happen, and we can keep it cordial for a few more minutes at least. So regarding I was just saying what you said in this example, that if it's supposed to be guidance, then you're already affirming in this example that it is guidance. So when I quote it to be guidance, you cannot then disagree with me and shout at me for some reason. So if you're saying in this case, the Quran is supposed to be guidance, in the example that you're given, I'm well aware that you don't believe it. In the example that you're given, if the Quran is supposed to be guidance, a part of that Quran tells you to go to the people of knowledge. The people of knowledge and the Prophet's life will be an explanation, and the examples of his prophets and companions will be an explanation for you to understand how to live by this book. So a part of the Quran directs you to those people of knowledge, because it's also directing you by guidance that that not everyone has the same level of understanding. Someone might take the Quran and understand it very well. Someone might understand it less. That will need someone to help him, give him a little bit of expounding, teach him a little bit. That doesn't mean it's confusing. Expounding upon something which is wise does not necessitate that the statement that was made was confusing or incorrect.
The Hadith, for instance.
Yeah, the Hadith or anything. The Prophet is the example, as the Quran says for us. For example, Allah says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. You had in the Prophet of Allah a great example for whoever wishes the last day. Whoever wishes goodness in the last day, you had an example in the Prophet. So we look at the life of the Prophet, how he lived his life. Allah tells us about his companions and those who followed them, not just his companions, but we have tabi'un and atba' tabi'un, the generations, a couple of generations that came after, because the Prophet told us that the best of generation is my generation, i.e. in faith and belief and adherence, and those who come after them, then the one who come after them. So for us to take and learn from these early generations. And this is, for example, what you'll see Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah and this voluminous work is doing. He's referring to these people, the companions of the Prophet who learned directly from him because he was the example, or the students who took from them, or the students of the students who took from them.
So the Quran itself is not the final revelation.
When did I say that? I was just answering right now.
I'm asking, is the Quran the final revelation?
Yeah, Quran is the final revelation. Yes.
Then why are there revelations and guidances which come after it?
Where is the revelation that is coming after it?
They're sitting right behind you.
Did I claim that the works of Ibn Taymiyyah was revelation?
Is it guidance?
No, you said revelation, and now we changed it to guidance.
I said guidance. I said guidance as revelation.
Please
allow me to speak. May you allow me to speak so that you don't misrepresent? I feel like
you're asking me a question, and whenever I speak, you interrupt me and then say to allow you to speak. That makes no sense.
Well, I would like to have a dialogue.
You want to speak?
Sure.
Okay,
yes.
but when you ask me a question, do not interrupt me mid answering, please. Go ahead.
Okay.
Because your question was, is it a revelation? Is the books before? I was answering, and then you interrupted me. So you pick one. Do you want me to speak or you not want me to speak? Go ahead.
Thank you for permission to speak on your stream. I appreciate it. So if the Quran is the final revelation, and that final revelation guides you towards the teachings which will come after it, and the teachings of the disciples of Muhammad and so forth, the Quran itself cannot be the final guidance and revelation, because there is additional guidance as revealed, as God says will be revealed to people who come after. For instance, the caliphs and the imams which came after. Do you see what I'm saying?
No, because no one said in this conversation from my side that the books behind me are revelation. We are saying that they are expounding. Guidance? Again, you see, I'll let you speak. I can easily let you speak, but you cannot let me speak for some reason because I'm going to refute what you say, with all due respect. So none of us have said that the books behind me is revelation. The only revelation that we believe is binding. And in fact, I answered that in the beginning of this conversation. I said any scholarly work is not binding. And you were supposed to be listening to me. I hope you were. When I was describing that, I was clarifying clearly that whatever in this book, unless it's backed up by the Quran or Hadith, is not binding for me as a Muslim. So there is a lot of things that can be written here in this voluminous work that I can easily reject. I can say, okay, there's the opinion of a scholar at a specific point of time, but I do not need to accept because that's not a revelation coming from God that is expounding on the revelation, just explaining to me the revelation. But somehow either you're conflating explanation of revelation as a revelation, which is obviously no one makes that point ever in history, but it's a new point, so it's good to listen to new points of view. Go ahead. Yeah.
So the expounding or the explanation that you just said that are in those books that you could choose whether or not to accept or reject. Did I characterize that correctly?
No.
Oh, you didn't say that? Okay.
No. I said...
Could you say it again?
Oh, no problem. I'll say it again. I'll say it slowly. The books behind me is a work of a scholar. Scholarly work by itself is not binding. What is binding is the Quran and Hadith. So if a scholar gives evidence from Quran and Hadith, I follow it because it's Quran and Hadith, not because it's a scholarly statement. He's just explaining that scholarly statement or expounding upon that scholarly statement, the meaning of the scholarly statement, the meaning of that revelation. He's not introducing new revelation or new meaning or an opposite meaning to what the text already says.
Are you ultimately relying on your own interpretation of the Quran when deciding whether or not to abide by the teachings from those scholars?
No, I don't rely I don't base my life on my own interpretation of the Quran. We believe that is what misguided the previous civilization. I base everything on the Quran and Hadith and the life of the Prophet, how he understood the Quran, how he applied the Quran, and his companions, how they understood the Quran, how they applied the Quran, and their students, and the scholars who expound the meaning of the Quran. The Quran itself tells me to learn from them.
Are there scholars of the Quran whose interpretations and explanations of the Quran you personally disagree with?
Absolutely, yeah. 100%. No doubt about that, yeah. There is many, absolutely. But it's not I personally disagree with. It's not that I personally disagree with. It's that they do not have sufficient evidence to back up their point. So the reason I would disagree with them or reject their positions is because it's not backed up by evidence, while another position opposite to them will be backed up by evidence. So it's not about my personal preference. It's about what the text shows me to follow and not to follow.
Which text?
The Quran and Hadith.
Do both? Okay, so scholars in the group that you agree with and scholars in the group that you disagree with on various points, do they both not use the Quran as their same base source text?
Not necessarily, no. For example, I'll give you a very basic example. There are schools of thought in jurisprudence. For example, there's a school of thought, and in a called the Hanafi, for example, and they have a position on marriage. When you conduct the marriage ceremony, is there a necessity for us to have two witnesses during the marriage ceremony? And the position of the Hanafi, for example, is you don't need two witnesses. The overwhelming majority of the rest of the scholars say, no, you need witnesses. Now, in this case, when you look at the Hanafi position, they don't have evidence saying that you don't need, while the other side have clear-cut evidence from the Prophet that there is no marriage without two witnesses. And any marriage that was conducted without two witnesses is considered invalid. So in this case, someone might ask, okay, why did they take that position to begin with? The reason is that narration of the Prophet did not reach them. That information did not reach them. So they based the ruling without the evidences reaching them, while we still have the evidences from the other overwhelming majority of scholars. So we do not take that position of that scholar because he does not have evidence to support his claim. Does that make sense now? I hope so.
That makes sense. Sure. So what you're saying is that there was a latency period between God revealing something or the prophet interpreting something from that revelation and the news actually reaching to the people, at least regarding how many witnesses to have at a wedding.
No. I said that I said that the overwhelming majority of scholars already have the evidences reaching them, while one person in this case, or one view, or one school of thought did not, in this particular matter, get the evidence. But the evidences was there with if the overwhelming majority of scholars disagree, they disagree because the news reached them. So if one individual somewhere, in some place did not hear evidence for something, that does not mean that there was a latency of God's guidance reaching the people. That just means that that one individual did not hear that specific point regarding that specific issue.
When that one individual,
Muslims, you know? Yes.
When that one individual did hear that point, did they change their view?
Yeah, there are many. There actually, Abu Hanifa himself, actually, may Allah have mercy on him. He said, not only him, but all of the imams of the four schools of thought in Islam, they said that if anything I say goes against the text, reject it. And whenever they saw evidences opposing some of what they believed in, they changed it. In fact, a prominent example of that is Imam Shafi'i, who's another imam of one of the schools of thought, the Shafi'i school of thought. He had one position when he was in one land, and when he traveled in Iraq and Egypt. He changed many of his views when he came across a lot of the evidences that he did not know before. So he changed his previous positions into new positions. So now, and this is the easy way for us, the work is all done. What we need to do as Muslims is we look at the scholarly opinions. We look at the evidence. If there is evidence supporting, and most of the time, the overwhelming majority of the scholars will have the evidence. And the people who didn't, they probably have missed the evidence here or there, which is very easily demonstrated because they don't have evidence to support their point. So we will go with the overwhelming majority of the scholars, and the guidance is already there and present in every civilization. And if you read these books and research, you'll find them.
So you say the work is already done?
Yeah. The work is already. Which, if you're referring to jurisprudence, most of the work is done. Yes, unless there is some new thing happening today, technology or this or that. Other than that, really, the work is done. Yeah, absolutely. If you open, that's why we have massive voluminous works like this, because these massive voluminous works expound on these evidences and positions.
So why are there still legal and religious denominational disagreements between Muslims if the work has been done? If the matter is concluded?
Yeah, because and I'm going to answer this, then I'm going to ask you a few questions, because I've given you like plenty of time to ask me questions, and there are people in the backstage as well. So the reason is simple, it's very simple. The reason is not everyone defers to the evidence when there's a disagreement. There are people who have diseases in their heart. There are people who like to follow their own desires. There are people who intentionally want to change the text. There are people with harmful intentions. There are hypocrites that pretend to be Muslims while they're not Muslims. There are many reasons why you'll have certain people disagreeing and changing teachings of Islam because they just don't like what the text says. And that does not change the reality that the guidance is there. And if you were to look, you would find the guidance in the end. And that the Quran itself teaches you. If you disagree over anything, you have to return it to the text. It's mentioned explicitly in the Quran in chapter 4 that obey Allah, obey the messenger and those in authority among you. And if you disagree over anything, if you differ over anything, return it to Allah and the messenger. So Allah tells us what to do, and not everyone follows the instructions given in the Quran. Now, my question to you now, which is to see how you're living your life now. So how do you decide anything to be good or bad, or what to do or what not to do in your life? Because you're asking me how I decide and what I do. How do you do it?
I don't believe in good and bad. I believe in cause and effect.
Okay, so you are saying if I bring my baby a breakfast and put it in the oven and chop it to pieces and eat it in my morning goodly breakfast, that's not wrong, right?
It's illegal.
No. So you're saying if it was legal in a country, it's okay. I can do it.
If it's legal and there's no consequences and you do it, and if you do that, I can tell you how you're doing that what that would cause me to do, which would try to arrest you and incarcerate you.
Well, you don't have legal authority in that land because it's not illegal in that country.
I understand that. I would still come and try to do that.
How would you arrest me when there is no law in that country?
Well, countries invade.
But irrelevant of what you're going to do, which is a subjective opinion, the action itself is not wrong.
If there is no right and wrong, no. But the consequence of that action would be that people, I think the majority of people, would come and find you and punish you. And I would agree with them in that action.
Yeah, I can be in that example. Either we've got a huge army who's going to protect me, or I got influences, and no one can touch me, so I can do it. So in that case, our point is about right or wrong. You keep talking about the consequence, which is not related. We're talking about the action itself, the doing of the action, regardless of the consequences. Is it right or wrong? And you're saying you cannot say it's wrong. For example, having intercourse with your own mother, for you, that's not wrong, isn't it?
It's repulsive to me personally.
Why?
Because it is. It's a priori repulsive to me. That doesn't address whether it's ethical or moral or not. I'm just saying it's gross, and I wouldn't do that personally. Just like you probably wouldn't have, because for the same reasons that I'm guessing you wouldn't want to have sexual intercourse with a member of the same sex or a dog or something, because it's gross. I understand that you have a reason you believe that's wrong, and I understand that. What I'm saying is I don't believe in the right and wrong. I'm just saying I wouldn't do that because it's gross. I am personally repugnated by it. Not because it's wrong, but because it is gross to me.
So you're socially conditioned to believe you shouldn't have intercourse with your mother. But if you were socially conditioned to believe it was not gross, you probably do it.
I mean, I love my mother, but she's not exactly my type either. So if I was socially conditioned to where that was more acceptable,
based on the cause and effect, of your worldview.
Are you going to let me answer? I said if I was socially conditioned to where that was more acceptable, I still probably wouldn't do that, because that's just not my type. Love you, Mom.
Oh, okay, so if your mom was your type, you would do it.
And if it was socially acceptable, I mean, if all things being equal, it's a much stronger possibility. It would certainly eliminate the obstacles and barriers psychologically, sociologically. I mean, we're asking a hypothetical, but as far as primate behavior is concerned, I suppose it's not too, down a rabbit hole. But it's sure. You're asking me whether it's right or wrong. I mean, let's talk about the genetic
I didn't ask
possibilities. Right, it could be that that kind of coupling between a kin so closely related here, trying to keep it clean for YouTube, would probably not have a genetically viable offspring. So there is an evolutionary reason why I am repugnant.
Yeah, you're not going to have children. You can use contraceptions.
Okay, well, I'm saying there is an evolutionary reason, which was the overwhelming majority of human history where there was no contraception. I'm saying that because of that.
But we're living today.
There's an understanding why. I understand. You're asking, well, maybe you're not asking, but I'm telling you, part of why we find that repugnant and gross and disgusting. And it's because genetically that's not a very viable thing to do. And it's also not very viable for certain primate sociological structures.
Yeah, no one is saying have kids. All we're saying is that you're going to do the intercourse to please your worldly desires of being a human, of being a man in this case, and you'd find that relative in this case, quote unquote, attractive, putting in your own words, or your type, using your own terminology, then you would do it essentially, which you just said. Sure. So, and this is now, and I'm going to finish with this. I think this is enough for us as a demonstration of the atheistic worldview. And this is why I asked in the beginning of this discourse and discussion: do you think atheism is a positive thing, or is something to be proud of? And the reason I asked that question is this: essentially, is that the atheistic worldview If it would really, and I would appreciate at least you're being honest. A lot of atheists are not. So if it was actually applied in reality and it was taken to its necessary conclusions, it would lead to nihilism, which you don't have a right or wrong. You don't have objective morality. You don't have right or wrong. It's all cause and effect.
Correct.
And it will lead that me literally killing someone, hypothetically in this case, would be rearranging atoms. It would not really be wrong for me to eat my baby at breakfast and cook it and clean and wash it in the sink or something. That would be okay. There's no problem. And that is why atheism is the most dangerous ideology that can ever exist if it were adopted by human beings or taken to its logical conclusions. And that's why always throughout history, the most vicious people in killing and murdering human beings, like Mao in China and his likes, and Stalin and those people, were atheists, because their necessary conclusion of their worldview is that there was no right or wrong. So it doesn't matter that what I'm doing is not wrong, essentially. It's just is just the rearranging of atoms. So I think people should be very worried. And this is a very great testament, people watching, to be very worried if their children want to become atheists or moving into atheism, or if atheism is ever taken a strong authority within a community, because it will end up leading us to this path of extremism in every way, shape, or form if people take it to its logical conclusion. Anyways, we had a nice chat, at least not the end, but maybe the beginning part. And I will let you go now because there are like full backstage as well, and I really need to end soon. There are so many people there. Okay, so okay, let you go, Max.
I really commend you for having this for an invitation for open discussion. Lopsided though it may be, it's your stream, but it's valuable, and I really appreciate you doing that. Thank you for having
no problem. As Muslims, we allow intercourse always.
Absolutely.
We don't have any issues with. Yes.
Muslims invented algebra. I mean, when intercourse happens, it's good, and that's why we need to have more of it. I commend you as being part of that tradition. Thank you.
No problem. Bye. Thank you.